Hi, welcome back to Interfax Live. We're here with Gil Roth, the founder and president of a new association, the Pharma and Biopharma Outsourcing Association. So,
Thanks.
Gil, first thing out of the box, though, I had a question, and one of the things are, seeing that you formed this association, can you help me clarify the alphabet soup? So we got CMOs, CROs, CDMOs, so help me out there.
Listen, over the years when I was the editor of Contract Pharma, we had to keep trying to parse this stuff, and somebody came up with the D, the CDMO idea around 2005, 2006, with the idea that it was contract manufacturers, but we also do development services, so let's add a D into that. But there's so much interaction. People still talk about CPOs, contract packaging organizations, and they sort of fall into the CMO sphere. The big thing I learned, trying to learn this industry 15 years ago when I started out was nobody really knows what all the acronyms are, and some companies have their own proprietary ones, and everybody thinks everybody else knows the answer. But a lot of times, we're all sort of flying blind with those. But I think we've done pretty well with ironing out what CMOs are, what the contract development companies do, and how that works in concert with the contract research organizations to help build the outsourcing ecosystem.
So the contract research organizations, contract manufacturing, pretty much that's it. So we got the contract, it's integrated. CMOs, they're going to package it as well for the most part.
Largely.
Okay, so I think we had a preliminary discussion, Gil, and just for my own, this is a globally based thing, or is it just for the United States, or?
For the moment, the Pharma and Biopharma Outsourcing Association is intended for CMOs and CDMOs that operate in or sell into the US, so you can be foreign-based. The way I put it is, as long as you're interacting with FDA, this is an association you need to belong to if you're a contract manufacturer. We have a few companies that are non-US, they're in Canada, so it's still North America. But we're perfectly amenable to European companies as well as ones from the Far East, as long as their CMO operations sell into America.
It seems to me that, this is a terrific idea. The idea of CMOs have been, what would you be, idea? CMOs as an active entity has been around for what?
As far as the history goes, you could say almost 25 or 30 years ago, you saw major pharma companies selling excess capacity, which I guess is sort of the proto-CMO, the first companies that did contract manufacturing, that did work outside of their own company's needs. But really in the last 18 to 20 years is when it took off, when you started to get carve-outs and pure play contract manufacturers, ones who didn't have product lines of their own.
Do you think a lot of that played with the excess capacity and large pharma selling off a lot of facilities stimulated this development?
Oh, certainly. A lot of companies out there, a lot of our member companies originated as pharma company X trying to reduce its own internal manufacturing network and selling off a facility to a venture capital group or to a management group at the facility with a trailing supply agreement which enabled them to get a contract manufacturing business going and then start bringing in new clients. So yeah, that's certainly where the industry started.
So the BPOA, as right?
Yeah. PBOA, Pharma and Biopharma.
Okay, so it sounds like a great idea. So obviously, let me ask you the question I'm sure you've been asked many times before. So why hasn't somebody done this before? Why hasn't it?
Well, that actually ties into that history of the industry. There's a certain fragmentedness to the types of companies that are there. Some of them are pure play, some of them are still part of large pharma companies. We have a few of them participating in the association. Some of them, they work in different dosage forms, they work in different markets, and they didn't necessarily see the commonalities that they had, the common ground that they could approach and work on. And from my position, when I was editing Contract Pharma magazine, I was a step removed, so I could at least look at them and try to see what things they had in common, not just what they did and how they differed from each other. And then once I had the idea for organizing them into an association, we really started to focus on those aspects, the things that they all know that they need. Even if there's particular agenda items that don't pertain to all the members, they all understand the need for advocacy, the need to have a unified voice in front of Congress and the FDA, as well as to help raise the profile overall for the industry.
So, for lack of a better, just because that's the way my brain thinks, pretty much we're looking at, it's modeled after like a pharma?
In a sense, we're essentially a nonprofit group that works for advocacy efforts for the industry. It's just that our scale is nowhere near pharma's scale or bio's scale, so we're working on the agenda issues that pertain to us and how we can best advance them. And in some instances, that might involve working in concert with other associations, like a GPHA, a Pharma, and a Bio.
Well, you're not at their level yet.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
we'll see if the CMO industry ever gets to that scale. We'll,
Okay, but
we'll work.
having said that, so how's the pickup in industry? What's been?
It's been fantastic. I started this process about 1 year ago at Interfex last year. As a matter of fact, I began recruiting companies, and within the first 2 months, I had 15 companies on board, a dozen of them as founding members, a few more as general members. And by June, we had our first board meeting, incorporated, had the bylaws in place. And this past quarter, we've really spent a lot of time down in Capitol Hill, working with FDA also, organizing a workshop to bring FDA in with our speakers, with our participants at a meeting in Washington. We've really started to make things happen, and we've started to make an impression on those regulatory and legislative bodies who just didn't know what the CMO industry was and how it fits into the pharma landscape.
So, let me see if I got it straight. So, in a lot of cases, FDA is kind of like not really up to speed on this whole what a CMO does, or?
I think in some respects they're very informed about the overall pharma industry. It's just that CMOs have always been a smaller subset because of non-disclosure agreements. They've never been, public companies. Nobody talks about them too much. And so I think it's just important for us, rather than to have individual CMOs talking to individual FDA members, for us to really show a unified presence and to really talk about what this industry is, how the economic model of it differs from that of pharma and biopharma. It's a different world in some respects, doing this manufacturing. And then to show the commitment that this industry has to quality, which is a very important, obviously a very important thing with FDA. We're really trying to work closely with them to try to advance a quality metrics initiative, to work on their guidance on quality agreements, and to show how this side of the equation works.
Okay, so while we're talking, so really, what's your long-term goals and short-term goals for the
We've got
organization?
there's a number of agenda items we're pursuing. We look at the big regulatory issues that affect the industry. Main ones are the generic drug user fee amendment, the reauthorization of the prescription drug version, serialization under the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, again, the quality metrics initiative that FDA is working on. We want to talk with them further about finding ways to demonstrate the quality that CMOs live under, operate under, as well as trying to find ways to reduce the auditing burden that CMOs face and that their customers face, and the amount of times they have to send people to audit CMO facilities. So we're talking with some groups to try to put together a sort of baseline auditing standard for different types of manufacturing, where perhaps we can have a PBOA certification. We'll have a third party that can audit a facility that the customer side would recognize as sufficing for most of its auditing needs, and thus reduce the amount of time it has to spend sending people to a CMO's site.
So it seems to me in certain cases that people have to really decide what they are. There's companies that manufacture, there's companies that subcontract, so, is it hard for a CMO just to come out and say that's what we are? It could be a generic company, has their own line of products. How does it break out?
With our guys, they're very accepting of, we have a CMO business. One of our major companies is Hospira 1-to-1, which belongs to the much larger company of Hospira, but this is their outsourcing division, and they recognize this is a CMO business that fits within the parent company. They're perfectly aware that they're part of a larger organization, but they're also very committed to the CMO mission. So.
Interesting. So, so it's been about a year since you got it started. So what progress have you made? We've heard about the meetings, and where else?
We've really made a big dent with Congress. I started doing congressional meetings in February and March, and much to my chagrin, I learned that I have to register as a lobbyist last month, which was not exactly where my college career was taking me, my whole liberal arts literature way, but I've discovered I seem to have some sort of aptitude for this, of going down there and talking to representatives, getting their offices to understand how CMOs fit into healthcare overall and how we can help advance legislation that's going to strengthen this industry. So really, that congressional impact, the contact with FDA, getting more companies on board, getting them to understand our mission and what we're trying to achieve, it's really been a kind of acceleration during the first quarter of 2015.
So, I mean, you have to register as a lobbyist, but in principle, you're not a lobby. You're not a lobby group.
We're an advocacy group,
right.
And because of the number of visits I made, by regulation, I now have to officially become a lobbyist. It's not our sole reason for being, but it's, if you have X number of contacts with congressional offices every quarter, you like it or not.
Yeah, I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, it's not a lobbying firm by any means, but
yeah.
it's an association that does legislative advocacy, which we can call lobbying. So.
Right. I mean, one of the things we heard yesterday was with these biosimilars and expansion into countries to make drug available for societies that do not have access to certain drugs, and moving these things in. And what were being talked about was portable processes. It would seem to me that this is a great opportunity for CMOs to get involved. So are you looking to move into other areas, other regions?
Yeah, our long-term ideas, there are two ways that the association can grow. One is to expand into other areas of outsourcing, earlier stage analytical services. There are other parts of the outsourcing equation that we're currently not touching because I didn't want to expand beyond I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew. The other area to go is to expand geographically, to start looking at Europe and then other regions beyond that to see how we can impact regulations and legislation in those areas that are going to, again, help strengthen this industry.
Where would you say the majority of your organization members lie in dosage forms? Are they predominantly sterile products?
We have a lot of steriles, a few biologic API that also do drug product. There's a few oral solid dosage companies on board. So like I said, there's a broad range of manufacturing types, of drug types that these companies touch. And those interests aren't always going to be 100%. There are things that are going to impact the steriles people that don't affect the oral solid dosage guys. But they all understand the need to have one body in place that we can break out into smaller groups to lobby and to advocate for particular areas.
Well, you said bioprocess. Is that the upstream stuff or the downstream?
Yeah, we have a few bio API, like they literally are the biologic API maker, but they tend to also do fill finish, and some of them have lyo services. So there's basically from drug substance all the way to drug product.
Right. Well, that's good. What we found out, you normally don't run into fully integrated companies. It's unusual. So let me ask you this. So on the NCE side, the small molecule, the less than 500 molecular weight type stuff, okay? Just to be clear. You got to be, there was a time where...
There are a lot of engineers here.
Yeah, right? So anyway, having said all of that, the synthetic part, I mean, you have membership in that area on synthesis processes, the traditional synthetic process,
Not as much. I didn't want to focus too much on the API end and the early stages for solid, small molecule type products, just because there are already some organizations in place that address that, and you can also start to border into the chemical industry in a way that, like I said, is already partly served, so I didn't want to start encroaching on other territories. If anything, starting from the contract pharma perspective, which is where I cut my teeth in this industry, I started out focusing on the drug product, the end user, the dosage form side of things, and we discover, of course, as you start doing that a lot of companies, it's not that easy. Some companies move further back in the chain. A few of our guys, in fact, do have small molecule API operations in addition to their dosage form work, but I didn't want to, again, bite off more than we could chew in terms of suddenly becoming an advocate for certain chemical legislation that's, again, already being addressed by other groups.
Understood. So let me ask you this, the fact that you had to define where you wanted to be and not be, so I would assume you've gone out and talked to other associations or find out what they're doing? So
yeah, we've been in touch. I've got contacts with a number of other trade groups out there, and there are a few that we're working with informally, looking at how we can work together in a more codified basis. The Parenteral Drug Association, who's also a big sponsor here, or big provider of sessions here at Interfex, we've had some very good conversations about CMO issues and how we might be able to work with them in terms of the scientific agenda that they're very good at pursuing. So
let me see so it's essentially So you've served, apparently you've addressed a need that was not previously addressed, which was pulling these guys together. So you are the organization BPOA, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Pharma, then Biopharma.
So we want to have a voice to government and yet regulatory agencies, which will be this conduit. So, how does one, how do you come up with that idea? I mean, I got to give you credit. I wouldn't have thought about it.
The genesis for it was an article I was reporting on for Contract Pharma back in 2013. It was a piece on the Generic Drug User Fee Amendment, GDUFA, and the facility fees that were levied as part of it. And the fees were structured in such a way that it seemed kind of unfair to the CMOs and CDMOs that were subject to it. And I began reporting on the article more and more and realized that when the fees were being decided upon, there was really no CMO representation. FDA negotiated with a few other trade groups to talk about, where the fees should be allocated, who should be paying for what, and how it should be broken down. But there was just nobody to argue for the CMOs. And I started asking the people I was interviewing for the article, do you think we need some sort of trade association or something that can get us into those meetings in future in Washington and Maryland? And every one of them said, oh my God, yes, we need this, Gil, and you should run it, which I think they thought was going to be, easier than it turned out to be. It took me about a year of time to, start currying interest. About 6 months into that process, we held a symposium the night before the Contract Pharma annual conference in New Jersey in September. Had about 30 CMOs present and really just sort of talked through what we would want if we were actually going to go forward with something like this. And the response was tremendous. People really wanted to see this happen. They wanted to fund something that would help lobby for them, help bring them together so that they could be heard. And by December of 2013, I realized I just wasn't going to be able to do that and keep putting out this magazine at the level that it needs to be put out. And so I gave my notice in January of 2014, finished up at the end of February, and started recruiting companies and came to Interfex to find as many of the CMOs that we needed to talk to.
So what does Interfex do for you?
I think it's a tremendous place to get all these contract manufacturers together. Just yesterday, we actually had the board meeting at the end of the first day of the show. We had our board meeting on site with the 12 companies that joined as sustaining members, as well as our chairman, Peter Bigelow, and myself. And of the 14 potentially available board members, only 2 of them weren't actually physically present. Everybody was here, and again, that covers oral solid dosage, small molecule, biologics. Everyone was either exhibiting here or they came to Interfex, both for the board meeting and for everything that this show has to offer.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time, Gil. I mean, but let's come around again and let's just talk about, to kind of bring this to closure, and that is, okay, so the BPOA, the Pharma and Biopharma organization, your objective is to?
We are here to represent the regulatory, legislative, and general business interests of the outsourcing sector for CMOs and CDMOs. And we didn't really talk about the general business side of things. We've talked very much about FDA and Congress. The third leg of that is really raising the profile of the CMO, CDMO industry, both in terms of getting the client side to better understand how to work with contract manufacturers and how better to handle project management, how to work through the RFP process with them, because not all potential clients are from the major pharmas. A lot of companies, the small and mid-size, are the ones who are the lifeblood of a lot of our CMOs and CDMOs. And we're hoping to do more outreach and industry research that'll help those companies better understand what it means to be a company that's outsourcing, and in this case, in many cases, outsourcing 100% of their needs.
Well, that's an interesting point then. I mean, yeah, we talk more strategy and tactical, but I think we missed the business point. So on that note, one of the things that we had talked about, and I totally forgot, is one of the things that is IP management going to be part of this business strategy? And
it's in part everything that the CMOs touch and everything that they have. Some of them have proprietary IP, and making sure that there's an understanding on the client side of what is proprietary and what belongs to them, what belongs to the provider. That's a big thing. Also, in terms of the legislative side as to how IP is protected and rewarded. That's also something that we're working on as part of our legislative agenda.
So, based on the business side, I'm hearing that you would provide guidances on establishment of these things, how to go about the RFP process, quality agreement?
That's part of our goal, yes, certainly, to put together white papers that can be done. In a sense, it's almost like what I was doing at Contract Pharma all those years, trying to explain the CMO process, explain the way you select a company, the way you work through it, the way you address quality agreements versus the master services agreement. There's a lot of aspects of it. Just having a skeleton key or some sort of roadmap for smaller companies, I think could benefit them and benefit the CMOs very much.
Well, Gil, I think it's been a year now, so we're looking at the next. What do you see, just to bring this to closure, what do you see as the major points you're going to try to accomplish in the next year now?
Well, in the middle of June, we have our public hearing with FDA on GDUFA. We're hoping that'll springboard into getting us in the door to talk with FDA as GDUFA comes up for reauthorization. We're working with a couple of groups about serialization trends to make sure that CMOs are prepared and that their clients understand what the needs are and what the timelines are to implement good serialization efforts. On top of those, like I said, doing some of the white papers, some industry research we're doing on the use of quality agreements that customers have with CMOs. Those are sort of the big agenda points that we're working on so far.
And what sort of resources are you looking for on the white papers? These are going to be coming from your members, I would assume?
Yeah, there'll be members and me. That's the one thing is that I'm still an editor at heart, so I'm still capable of sitting down and writing 1,500 words on a topic when the need hits.
So Gil, looks like you got your work cut out for you. So that brings a close to our discussion around the CMO trade organization, the Pharma and Biopharma Outsourcing Association.
Thanks
Gil,
so much.
really want to thanks a lot. It was great having a chance to talk to you. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Russ.